Welcome back. For our next keynote, we're going to have a fireside chat with the original creators of Apache Druid. F.J. Yang, CEO of Imply, Gian Merlino, CTO of Imply, Vadim Ogievetsky, CPO of Imply, and Eric Cheddar, Field CTO of Imply. Welcome, I'm Rachel Podreski, and I am here with 4 amazing special guests. Well, here with 3 of them. We have, one beaming in through the magic of the internet. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Apache Druid, its past, present, and future. Ooh. Anyway, let's start off. Can you guys please give me your name, your role at Imply, your role within the community, and what delights you about Druid? So there's lots of things to handle here, but
Sounds
FJ.
good. Hey everyone, I'm FJ. I'm co-founder and CEO at Imply and on Apache Druid PMC. What delights me about Druid is that it's very fast.
Excellent.
Hi everybody, I'm Vadim, co-founder of Imply and person that deals with all things visual. And what delights me about Druid is the web console that's built into it.
I'm Gian Merlino. I'm a co-founder at Imply, and I'm on the Druid PMC. And I think the thing I like most about Druid is the name.
My name is Eric Cheddar. I am the field CTO at Imply. The thing that delights me the most about Druid is the names of the variables.
Excellent. So that actually was what inspired my question, is because my very favorite one is, I can't even pronounce it, but it's the name of a grouper, which is a fish, as part of the grouping, which I thought was really cool. Anyway, so next question. So whose idea was Druid? And what inspired those first lines of code? And FJ addressed some of this in his previous presentation, so I'm actually going to go next to Vadim. Vad, tell me.
Well, I was there when the idea of Druid was born in Eric's brain. I was sitting next to him, and I remember it as Eric hip-chatting me a URL on his local deployment and saying, run this. And I believe that was the first Druid query run by somebody who wasn't Eric. But Eric, maybe you can elaborate on how the idea came to you?
Yeah. So it came kind of as a mix of inspiration from a lot of different sources. We were trying to build a dashboarding thing that could do arbitrary slice and dice. We started out with kind of a traditional relational database, ran into some issues. Hadoop was really big at the time, so we started doing a bunch of pre-compute and throwing things into HBase. Ran into some issues there. I'd remembered some things that I heard from coworkers of mine at LinkedIn, a guy named John Wang and a few other people, about kind of what happens when you just throw data in memory and do stuff with it. And I was like, well, what if I try that out? And tried it out, sent Vadim a query, was like, hey, try this out. And it was kind of cool.
So that's very interesting. So you're saying that Druid started as an in-memory database.
It did. It did start as an in-memory database. There was no, all of the data existed kind of in data structures inside of the JVM, sitting on heap. We would load them up lazily based on queries coming in, and so there was like pure separation of compute and storage. Over time, it's evolved to actually page things on and off disk, adjust things so that it can size up based on the amount of disk on the machine rather than the actual memory. But yeah, it started as kind of pure in memory, pure separation of compute and storage. But due to performance limitations there, we've evolved it pretty heavily over time.
Very cool. Now, so there's lots of rumors circulating out there about where the name Druid came from. Everything from, this is Gian's, choice of religions to, places in World of Warcraft. Can somebody please put all these to rest and tell us, where did the name Druid come from?
I see heads looking at me, so I'll take this one. The answer to this goes a little deep into gaming, but in RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons, a game called EverQuest, Warcraft, World of Warcraft, which I don't know, I probably spent too much of my life on back as a kid. There are different classes that you can play, and when you're playing the game, you come together as a team to defeat kind of the large bosses. And each person has a role. There's like a tank that absorbs damage, there's a healer that heals damage, there's DPS or people who deal damage. And when you come together as a team, you're able to do more than any of the individual parts and defeat the big bad monster. And the idea of Druid was that the Druid class in all of these games, tends to be a bit of a shapeshifter. It can switch between the roles. It can be a DPS at one point, a healer at another, a tank at another. And so the idea of Druid was actually encapsulating this idea of kind of a team of a bunch of different things that are each doing a role, but when they come together as a team, they can kind of defeat the big bad monster or do something better than anyone individually.
I can draw some parallels there. Don't think that's very hard. That's very cool. So then that begs the question: who's the biggest gamer out of the four of you?
I think I'm going to nominate myself.
Probably you, Fangen.
Yeah, I think
Still
I'm gonna
though?
nominate myself. Not anymore after having children, but I think growing up, I would not doubt that I played more than everybody else.
I don't know. I think having children is the ultimate role-playing game. But all right, we haven't heard from Gian, so this is for Gian. So as Druid grew, what surprised you the most about how it evolved?
And I think the thing that was most notable to me about how Druids evolved over time is it's gained so many new capabilities on top of this really like hardcore it has of super high performance, which was I think the reason it existed in the first place. And the whole thing that we're trying to do here at Imply is kind of keep that moving, keep adding more and more capabilities, but not forgetting where we came from, which is trying to make the fastest database in the world.
Now, I think Vadim had a really good metaphor for that earlier about the car you were talking about.
Yeah, well, I was saying before off camera that I think when Druid started out, it was kind of like a top speed dragster. It can go a quarter mile very quickly, but it can't really turn or do other things. And this is what I meant, but by the API, it didn't even have arithmetic operators at first. It could just like index columns and do group bys really fast and then do aggregations on top of that. But then as the API has evolved and we added lots of features, it's really built out all of these like features around the core engine while still remaining really fast at doing the quarter mile, which is very exciting.
And also pretty tough. I think that's one of the technical challenges that I like most at Imply. And working on Druid. It's trying to build out all these capabilities and to make the system more and more powerful while not doing things that slow it down.
So why open source? I mean, this is an open source conference. So why open source and why Apache?
So one is, I think our initial motivations for open sourcing the technology were around this idea that we had taken a lot from the community. Like the community had provided us with storage systems and processing systems and various libraries to do various things. And I think part of being an engineer is wanting to give back to that overall community. And that was really the initial motivation behind Druid. We created something, we thought it had value, and we wanted to give it back to the community, see if others could find value as well. I think the Apache license is the de facto standard of open source systems, especially open source data systems. And it's the most freeing of what you can do. I think it's the most permissive of what you can do with data systems. And I think we really wanted the license to be Apache because we didn't want to restrict ways that people could use Druid or embed Druid or anything else with it.
Yeah.
You covered it really well. I think one of the interesting things was discovery of what happens when you go open source. And it's pretty cool because generally when you build infrastructure, you build it for a purpose, and you have one set of ideas of how it should be used. When you open it up and let other people do things, you end up getting exposure to a much wider kind of world of different things that can be done, different problems, different ideas. and getting that exposure really it helps expand the capabilities. It helps you to, I don't know, it sounds a little cliche, but expand your mind a little bit in terms of what can be done and different ways to do things. And I think that's a kind of cool discovery that came out of going open source.
Well, and congratulations, because at last time I checked, there's about over 11,000 people in this open source community with over 1,200 organizations actively involved in Druid. So I think so you guys made a good decision there.
I want to say a little bit about not just the Apache license, but also the foundation. So Druid was just Druid for a while, and then became Apache Druid after a few years, actually. And I think joining the Apache Foundation, not just having the Apache license, has been, I've enjoyed working there in that context. I think once Druid became Apache Druid, it sort of gave people a framework for contributing in a way that was maybe less clear how it worked before. It's sort of very clear how to work with an Apache project, how to contribute to an Apache project. And I think that experience has been pretty positive too.
Yeah, there's more to open source than just the license.
So the original use case for Druid was for programmatic advertising, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from there, I mean, that's a well-established use case still to this day. But what's the most surprising or interesting use case that you guys have heard Druid used for that you're just like, wow, that's just super cool?
I think the most interesting one for me is its applications in cryptocurrency analytics. Didn't even know cryptocurrency analytics was a thing. And then I saw the project picked up for that, which I thought was really interesting.
But this stuff didn't even exist when you guys had thought
No,
of
it
Druid.
did not.
Yeah, I think for me, it's actually when people start applying it to tests running on production lines of things. It would have, it honestly would not be one of the use cases I would have written down ever for Druid. I don't know why. I guess it wouldn't have occurred to me, but that was a really cool one to see.
One of my earliest memories of working with the original team and talking with Vadim is him telling me that he's not going to rest until Druid is used in space, and I'm with you on that. I'm still waiting for the space-based applications.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's some applications in healthcare that I think are pretty cool. And there's a bunch of interesting challenges around there about ensuring that you're maintaining privacy while still adding value. And that's anyway, it's pretty cool and interesting.
Well, and yeah, and now in our post-pandemic, everybody's going through digital transformation. I think we're going to see a lot more of those, very cool health or space or crypto use cases coming out.
Or supply chain monitoring. I hear that's interesting these days.
So that being said, using Druid is considered a best practice for anybody doing streaming analytics. So what are the type of applications would benefit from this best practice in your eyes? And what are the key indicators that organizations should look for if determining that they need that type of tools or solution?
I think I think to put it as simply as possible, if you're trying to put an analytical experience in front of a large number of users, people inside your company, people outside your company, you want that experience to be fast. And you want that experience to be always available, and you want it to be powerful in terms of what kinds of filters and groupings and whatnot you let people apply. If you're trying to do that, you should use Druid or something like Druid for sure. That's what we created it for, and it's what probably 80% of the use cases today are doing with it.
Okay, so how does Druid change the big data and data warehouse landscape that we see today?
So one, I think that it's actually an evolution of different use cases inside of the big data landscape. And I think big data started out as, I have a lot of data, I need to do something with it. Let me understand how many people were visiting my website or stuff like that. It really started out as internal, almost business analytics and business intelligence type of stuff is where people started with big data. But then over the last 5, 10 years, probably 10 years, people have started to realize people I don't know, there's sayings out there that data is the new oil and all of that sort of stuff, where people are realizing that data, you can use data to do a lot inside of your application. And so it's moving from applications that are facing analysts, facing internal people who are understanding how a business operates, to actually exposing data to end users, to actually using data to do something that is a value-added portion of an actual service. And I think Druid fits in that world, and it's more exemplifying kind of the evolution of big data to actually powering applications. And that's really where we tend to sit as well.
Then to follow up on that, then what does the near-term future look like for databases like Druid?
Well, I think that what you sort of see in the data world is you see these sort of cycles where everything gets blown up, and then there's a million different ways of doing things, and then people have a new normal, and then everything gets blown up again. And I think where we are now is one of the reasons we're getting all these pressures to add capabilities to Druid and things like that. Is I think we're kind of coming up on one of these periods where things have been blown up, and so we did have the introduction of cloud data warehouses. We had the introduction of real-time databases, real-time analytic databases like Druid. And I think people, now that they have these new tools, are realizing these tools are going to replace the ones that were popular a decade ago or even 5 years ago. And people are trying to figure out how it all fits together. And that's what's going to happen, I think, over the next year or two, is we're going to figure out how these new tools are going to fit together in this landscape people have.
Okay, this question is for all of you guys. If you had one tip for anybody just getting started with Druid, what would it be?
I think the most challenging thing about databases in general is getting the data model correct. And I would say that the most important thing about working with Druid is if you're new, is not to assume that the data model that you're used to, for example, a star schema or a key value data format, is just going to work out of the box with Druid, and to take a little bit of time to understand how Druid expects data to be formatted.
Yeah. Well, if you're new and you're just starting out, we did a lot of work to make the quick start as simple as possible, so you can just run it. I think there's one command line thing that you have to run, and then the rest is point and click. And the interface teaches you a little bit about Druid concepts and also shows you how to model some data.
I'd say that, riffing on what FJ said, what Druid's really, really good at, what it's really designed to do, is to ingest huge tables and really blast through them at query time. And so the way you want to think of things is you want to think of things as, I have this giant table, I'm going to apply some filters to it, and the rows that match the filter, I'm going to do some grouping or scanning or whatever. And so you don't want to do a lot of pre-computation. A thing that makes me really sad is when I see someone that gets this beautiful data stream coming out of Kafka topic, something like that, and then they spend all this effort denormalizing it to put it into their warehouse, and then they load that normalizing it. Ugh. They spend all this time normalizing it to put it into their data warehouse, and then they load those same normalized tables into Druid, when they really should have just connected Druid directly to Kafka, and that would have worked a lot better. So just don't overthink things. Think in terms of one giant table. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, and I guess the thing, I agree with everything so far. The thing that I can add to it is that two of the kind of data modeling configurations that are most important and often overlooked are there is data sorting and data partitioning kind of built into Druid. You can partition data by certain fields, and that definitely has an effect on your query performance, and there is an alignment to do with whatever your product experience is around that. And then also you can sort the data, and sorting the data in different ways can optimize for certain query configurations, it's a very common thing kind of in the databasing world, but it's sometimes overlooked just because you can just throw things into Druid and hey, it works. But there's even more performance that you can get out of it by aligning partitioning and sorting to your use case.
All right, last question. So we've got a full lineup. I think there's over 30 talks for Druid Summit this year. Which ones do you guys recommend people should go listen to? Which ones are you going to go listen to?
So I think there's a really good distribution of different types of talks, and I think for people, they should attend the talks which are most relevant to them, whether that's by industry or reference architecture or deployment or use case or anything else. So I think it's a great set of speakers. I think it's a great set of presentations as well. So pick your favorites. There's no wrong choice.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time today to answer my questions. And thank all you Druids out there for joining us on this fireside chat. We hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Thank you.